Okay, to graph a system of two linear inequalities, these are the basic ones. First of all, general graphing inequalities. If the inequality is not underlined, you are going to graph with a dotted line. If it is underlined, you are going to graph with a solid line. If it's less than, you shade below the line. If it's greater than, you shade above the line. So I'm going to write these side by side so that I can actually work with them. So y is less than negative 3x plus 2, and y is greater than or equal to 3x minus 5. Okay, these are both in standard form. First of all, this first one, the inequality is not underlined, so it's going to be a dotted line. And it's less than, so it's going to be below the line. I always determine that before I start working with whatever information I have. Now in slope-intercept form, I want to make the number in front of x, I want to make it a fraction. So this one I'm going to put a 1 under it, and I'll show you why in a moment. When I'm graphing with slope-intercept form, I use 0 and then the number that doesn't have a letter attached to it, which is 2, because that's your y-intercept. And then I use the denominator of the fraction. That's why if it's not a fraction, just pop a 1 under the bottom. I use the denominator because the denominator scratches out the x, and then you do what's left. So negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. So my 2 points are 0, 2, and you only need 2 points to make a line. And 1, negative 1. And I said I'm going to use a dotted line for that one. And I said I'm going to color below that. You really shouldn't go over the dotted line. Dotted line means you can't include that point. Okay, so this one's underlined, so that's going to be a solid line. And it's greater than, so that's going to be above that line. Okay, I do not have a fraction in front of x, so I'm going to put a 1 under the bottom. I need a 0 and the number that doesn't have a letter attached to it, negative 5. And then my denominator, because it scratches out the x, and then you do what's left. 3 take away 5 is negative 2. Okay, so 0, negative 5. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, negative 2, 1, 2, and I said I'm going to connect that with a solid line. And I'm going to color above or on top of that line. Okay, your solution is not a number. Your solution is a region, and it's the region where you can see the colors are going to overlap. So it starts here. So just kind of circle the region, and that would be the answer. And it would go off to the left into infinity. Okay. I'm going to put these two side by side. So y is greater than negative 3x plus 2, and y is less than or equal to 3x minus 5. Not underlined, so I'm going to use a dotted line. And it's greater than, so I'm going to color above that. I need to put a 1 under my number in front of x. Okay, so I'm going to use 0, 2. And then my denominator is 1, and that scratches out the x, so negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. So 0, 2 is here, 1, negative 1 is here. I set a dotted line, and I'm going to shade it above. So a dotted line and above means on top of the line. So I'm going to shade it over here. Okay, the next one. This is underlined, so I am going to use a solid line to graph it. And less than means below the line. Make your first number a fraction. Okay, so I use 0 and the number that doesn't have a letter attached, -5. And then I use the denominator of my fraction. Scratch out the x. 3 take away 5 is -2. Okay, 0, -5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, -2. 1, 1, 2. And I set a solid line. Oops, just a second. I can't see my other point. There it is. And I said that I'm going to shade below that line. Well, let me do a different color so you can see where they overlap. And where they meet, or where they overlap, that region there is the answer. Y is greater than 3x minus 2. Y is greater than or equal to 2x, -2x plus 5. Okay, the first one is not underlined, so that's a dotted line. And it's greater than, so I'm going to color above it. I'm going to make a fraction from my number in front of x. Okay, so 0 and the number that doesn't have a letter attached. And then my denominator scratches out the x. 3 take away 2 is 1. Okay, 0, -2, and 1, 1. And I am going to use a dotted line and color above it. So a dotted line, and I'm going to color above it. Above and on top of mean the same thing. Okay, so more or less like that. The next one is underlined, so I'm going to use a solid line. And it's greater than, so I'm going to color above it. Make a fraction. Okay, so I've got 0 and the number that doesn't have a letter attached. And then I have my denominator, scratching out the x. Okay, -2 plus 5, that's like 5 take away 2, that's 3. Okay, 0, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to use a solid line. And I'm going to color above or on top of that line. And the region where they overlap is the answer.